Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Howdy folks, and welcome to this video where I'm going to be painting an ultralisk for my Alien Hive's Zerg theme army. Now this is going to be a particularly interesting video because if you recall from some of the other ones, I primed the first batch of minis when it was too hot and too humid and I got the dreaded fuzz effect. But this one here was the second ultralisk that I didn't prime that day, and I was able to prime it when the weather conditions were a lot better. So at the end of the video, I'm going to be able to show the difference between painting one of these that has been fuzz primed and painting one that has been correctly primed, both using the same speed paints, and we'll see it's quite a difference. So, nothing really new in terms of the colors here. In fact, for most of this army, I'm using the same three colors. The satchel brown for the carapace, the swarm purple for the skin, the accents, the flesh, things like that, and then the bone color for claws and hoofs and spines and things like that. But other than that, it's just those three. Maybe a little bit of highlighting here and there, but those are the base colors. So as I start putting on the satchel brown here, I could already tell there was a big difference. When I started painting on the speed paint with the fuzzy stuff, it immediately just absorbed it like a sponge. Whereas when I put this on, I could spread it, it pooled, it stayed in place, but it also flowed. Like it behaved very, very differently. And I could already see that it was starting to dry a much lighter color. So I was curious and a little bit worried that as I painted this thing, it was going to look too different from the other one and I'd have to find some kind of alternative. I was worried it would stick out from the rest of the army. But let's keep going and see what happens. When I moved on to the purple, I noticed the exact same thing, that the paint behaved much differently on a not entirely slick surface, but on a much smoother surface than the fuzzy prime got. And as I was painting, I started to realize I probably wouldn't have to highlight this thing at all. The problem with the fuzz paint is it absorbed the paint exactly where you put it, and it absorbed all of it. So it didn't actually give you the effect that speed paint is supposed to with the shade and the highlight. So as I was painting this, I realized I would actually get to see what the speed paint could do all by itself. And as you see when it's done, you could highlight, but you really don't need to. So you can see, at least on the front feet, that once it dries, it actually produces enough light and shadow that you really don't need to highlight. And that me having to do it last time was because of the fuzz. Now I got a bit messy doing the brown, so now I got to come back with some white and paint over those spines coming out of the top of the model, because there is no way that the lighter bone color speed paint is going to cover up that darker. The darker one would work in the opposite direction, but I gotta tidy my messes. So now let's get out the pallid bone and give that a bit of a try. I managed to miss most of the feet, the toes at least, and didn't have to repaint those. So I guess we can compare what does it look like over a much more solid opaque prime versus the slap chop prime. So here you can see how the spines on top are a little different color than the toes because it had the different white and it had a solid opaque covering. It doesn't look awful, and I still go back and forth on whether I like the convenience of the speed paint versus the other one. I don't know. I just can't seem to decide. Now, I got this far in the model and then realized I forgot to put any highlights on the carapace. So I'm going to get to pretend I'm a surgeon here and try and dry brush that carapace shell without getting anything on the horns. It's going to be interesting. It won't be the greatest of dry brushes, but I at least need that to try and get it to blend in with the other model a bit. But I did notice as I was working here, I didn't have to put on as thick of a layer. The speed paint really was doing its job of creating contrast between the light and dark areas, and what I was just dry brushing for was to add color to some of the highlighted areas that were almost turning a little bit too white. So while it was a mistake on my part, it was actually pretty easy to correct. And then do it again with the Scrag Brown. And this wasn't too bad because by this point I was only hitting very, very raised, tiny areas of highlighting, and I didn't have to worry too much about accidentally brushing up against the spines or anything. So easily fixed, but don't make that mistake like I did. So now we're moving on to the blades and the arms, and this was going to be difficult because I knew now that it wasn't fuzzy, that painting it the way I did with the other one was not going to work because any washes or paints that I used were going to soak in. So what I did here, on a guess, was used a Nuln Oil just right out of the box, or out of the jar, I should say. On the other model, I had to put on several coats of it, thinned down, so that it didn't just immediately soak in and turn these blades into a super, super dark gray. But I was fortunate that when I started putting on a coat here, simply because the model no longer had the fuzz, it was able to spread, settle in the cracks, and with such a bright white undercoat, it dried in just about the same gray color as the other one. You'll see at the end they're not identical, but as we say in this channel, they were good enough. So here he is on his completed base. No need to show you the base, that's in a totally separate video. Now, as I was staring here doing the video filming, I realized I forgot his teeth. He looks like the Cheshire Cat or Zig Ziglar or some other, like television salesperson. So I'm gonna have to go back and fix those teeth, but that'll be pretty easy. A quick once over with the pallid bone and it'll be done. So here they are. On the right is the fuzzy one, on the left is the not fuzzy one. You can clearly see a difference in contrast. I was able to use highlighting to bring the model up in color, but it really made a difference having a decent foundation to paint on. The one on the right looks more like a Happy Meal toy. The colors are a little too solid, whereas the one on the left, there's some contrast, there's some depth. It obviously looks better, but I mean, both these guys are going to see the tabletop because while they're not perfect, for this army, they are most definitely good enough.